Let's do it.
Okay.
All right.
All right, y'all, we're gonna get started. It's a really intimate group, which makes me feel better. I'm excited to have a chat with y'all about the 2022 State Index on Youth Homelessness. I'll start by introducing myself and then the co-host, Jeremy, who is joining us via Zoom today. We'll go next. So, hi everyone, my name is Aleya Jones, she, her pronouns. I'm a senior state policy officer at True Colors United. We're working to end and combat youth homelessness for LGBTQ folks across the nation.
And my name is Jeremy Penn. I use she, they pronouns, and I'm the interim youth attorney at the...
We can't hear Jeremy.
Hey, Jeremy.
Can you all not hear me? Hello, hello. Let's try.
We're having failings of tech.
How's this?
There's still, yeah.
Is there?
There's no one online besides us. And just yeah, I was like 3 participants. So. Issue.
All right.
Should I really go see if I can find someone?
It might be helpful just because of this guy keeps failing, but okay. So should I skip forward? Oh, let's see if I can find this guy. This one. Okay.
Can you guys hear me now or no?
So Jeremy's talking, but we don't have any
No
sound.
noise. You can't hear me at all. Testing, testing, 1, 2, 3. I can hear. Ooh.
It would be ours. I have the feeling.
They know. Oh, Jeremy's gonna try to maybe call in. Let's see.
Well, how's everyone doing this morning? Yeah. Nice. Okay. Hey, perfect.
All right, sounds good. Is the website selfish?
Oh yeah, do we need to do that?
I'll do that while I'm sitting there.
Because we might as well then.
Right.
Yeah, Katie Myers got Jeremy's.
Oh.
There you go.
Oh, jeez. Guess my phone was really on silent. All right.
Gotta love a tech issue.
Hey, Jeremy. I don't think we can hear you in the room, although you're on mute now. But I think it's actually a room issue and not a you issue because our presentation little device keeps failing. Just put you on speakerphone. Yeah, definitely. We might still have the problem though that our presentation isn't showing, but I will put you on speaker and we'll try.
What if we
Someone should be coming over.
All right, Jeremy, can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. It might not be loud enough for the room actually, but
Got it.
all right. We'll do this for now.
So did you say that the PowerPoint is not visible for people?
It is now, but the little thing that makes it project keeps like turning off. But we can try to go. Maybe just talk loud and we're on the youth team slide.
I can see the PowerPoint. I don't know if that makes a difference.
Yeah, that's good.
Wonderful. Hi everyone. I can't see you, but I am very happy to be here. Thank you for bearing with us.
I woke up feeling under the weather and we didn't want to subject you all to whatever cold I might have. It's not COVID-19, thank goodness. I am Jeremy Penn. I use she, they pronouns. I am honored to be the interim youth attorney who has taken over Gabby's portfolio after passing this year. And I have been, it has been a pleasure to be working with Aleya and Katie and Erica on the state index this year. I'll introduce the rest of the team, although I think you've certainly met them all already. There's myself, Katie Myers-Scott, who's here in front of you, valiantly trying to get all of this to work. Eric Tarr is our legal director, and Erica Lopez, our fearless communications associate.
So Jeremy alluded to this briefly. Actually, one of their colleagues. One of their colleagues passed away about a month ago as we were working on this report. Gabby was a fearless advocate for youth homelessness. We miss her dearly. It's definitely hard to continue doing this work since she's not here with us anymore. And I'll pass it to Katie to talk more about Gabby. This was her direct supervisor. So.
Oh, sure. So I'll just briefly, I think some of you might have been at the award ceremony last night and saw a presentation about Gabby, but so this particular project, the State Index on Youth Homelessness, is something that was like a signature project for Gabby. When she came on board to the Law Center last year, the whole idea was to take like what's essentially a very, in some ways, a dry like presentation of, okay, we've got, you know, all these various laws, like 60 plus metrics that we're looking at in 50 different states, and plus DC, and here's where things stand. Gabby was like, okay, that's good to know where things stand, but like, where are we going? You know, like, how are we actually gonna, you know, make a difference in ending youth homelessness through this index? So a lot of what her work was figuring out how to move the data in the index into action. And so we'll talk a little bit about that this morning. At the 201 session this afternoon, we're going to talk a lot about that, of figuring out like where are sort of the pinch points for youth as they move through like all the various systems that affect them for youth homelessness. So we're doing this in honor of Gabby. We're trying to keep this work moving as she would want. And thanks for giving us a second to just honor her this morning.
So in the spirit of Gabby thought it was really important to always share a little bit about our why behind the work, what our story is. I'll go ahead and start. I do not have a lived experience of homelessness. I think that's really important for me to share. However, several members of my family have experienced homelessness before. And there's been a lot of generational poverty in my family. And so I think that has overall just guided my work and made me want to not only just work at True Colors United, but I've worked for a Black think tank before. I've done direct service nonprofit work. It's just embedded to who I am at my core. This is a picture of me from college. Actually, I started an organization called Colors to create a space for queer people of color on campus. And as I shared, True Colors works to end youth homelessness for LGBTQ folks overall. So I just felt like the alignment with like Colors and the True Colors United made it like meant to be for me to work here for now. Jeremy, I'll pass it to you.
Yeah. Again, I apologize if you can't hear me. So I do not have any experience with being unhoused, but I have lots of different things that I'd love to bring into this space with me. I grew up in a verbally abused household. I am a survivor of intimate partner abuse and sexual violence, and I am very loud, out, and proud as trans. This photo is a photo of the Spectrum office, which was the LGBTQ group that served as my home for 4 years in college. And y'all are getting a very emotional version of me today because we got to hear Representative Corey Bush speak last night.
They're not displaying.
It's not displaying.
Okay. Maybe we should just turn it then, so they can see for now.
We could, yeah.
I'm so sorry, y'all. This is not great. Jeremy, just so you know, they can't see the presentation, unfortunately, so.
Okay, we're actually getting some little tech support now. Thank you guys. It keeps like not working. Like it'll sometimes work for a bit and then it'll stop working, or when I advance the slide, it doesn't show it on the screen.
And I joined from my phone just to make sure that it was working,
Yeah,
just to make sure that people could get into it if they were
Yeah.
trying to at home.
and it was working. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you all for bearing with us. First session of the day is always the hardest, right?
I hope so.
I hope so.
I was like,
For us.
maybe we should always have like a very low tech version of the presentation ready. Like we just. Exactly.
Yeah.
You look up whiter.
One of the things that, since I.
We could have actually brought in like a big United States map. Like flat, like it's on it.
Well, we never actually marked it.
I don't know.
It's just funny that it's happening. Yes,
Yeah.
of course.
So it kind of sucks to not see the visuals, but I'm a little worried. Like, I don't think we're going to be
We don't
able
want to
to.
run out of time.
Yeah.
It's a walk.
So maybe we just walk
Walk
through.
I can also just, I don't necessarily.
And we should mention that we can't hear Jeremy, so you can.
Jeremy's asking if there's a spare laptop.
I have my personal laptop.
That's true.
Yeah.
We've moved on. You know, this it's a good thing none of you want CLE credit, because this would not qualify.
I do have my personal laptop. And we can
Well,
just-
I wonder if we could send the presentation to them again, and they could just put it on their laptop up there, and I'll share.
Oh yeah, can we just share the presentation from the Google Drive?
As long
Is
as
that bad?
they don't see the, I mean. So,
Yeah. That's no way to.
I mean, they're gonna get it anyway afterwards.
Yeah.
Although-
Yes, ish.
So
They.
she or they, yeah. What did you say, Jeremy?
There should be a way up there.
Yeah. The only problem is I'm a little bit worried I mean, it's not like this is working anyway, so I'm just gonna stop sharing, actually.
I'll share it.
But then how will people get it in the room? Sweet.
Can someone share their email, and I'm gonna send it, and then y'all will just show it on your laptop? Okay.
K.H. Williams
K.H. Williams.
at RSE.org.
Okay. I just sent it to you.
Sorry, it's this thing about 5 minutes.
It's like about 5 minutes to get to you.
Okay. All right, guys, get ready. Bam!
Yeah.
All right. So is that where we are? Is on the objective slide? Okay. We're on the objective slide. If you're looking for where we are.
There we go. Okay.
Okay.
It works.
Wow.
Oh, and it's working. So we have
Now, are we able to
sound.
get
Our sound isn't working, so our co-host on Zoom is talking through his cell phone at the moment.
But let's try maybe on.
But
Can you guys
have
hear me
to-
now or no via Zoom? Yes, no, can you hear me?
Oh,
You can't do my.
oh,
Just pause yourself, Erica.
Probably.
Who's on the phone?
yeah, we can hang up the phone.
I know.
Is there still an echo?
No,
Not from-
Oh, I'm still getting it. It's odd, even though the phone's not running. But can you guys hear me?
Well, it's not gonna come through the speaker because the click share isn't working, so you have to hear it just from the laptop.
Okay, and then go present the presentation again.
Okay,
I mean, I can unmute my computer every time Jeremy needs to speak.
Because he shares sound. Would that work?
oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, hold on. Let me stop share and make sure the sound is sharing too.
Okay,
Nice.
All right,
Jeremy,
Jeremy?
talk.
Testing, 1, 2, 3.
It looks like someone's laptop is muted from the room.
It's mine.
Okay, try muting yours.
Testing, 1, 2, 3.
Whose laptop is on?
So y'all have to,
You mute?
you have to turn
The volume all the way down.
Because it's
Oh, just mute us. Right there. Okay, now Jeremy talk.
Testing, 1, 2, 3.
Yeah.
Oh.
Which
Yeah.
just
Your
coming through
audio
my
was on, that's
computer.
why.
Jeremy, can you hear me though?
Say that again?
You hear me?
Oh, well, I mean, I guess me saying, say that again kind of proves the point. I can, you're just a bit faint.
And it shouldn't be coming through my laptop. We should be hearing the sound through the room.
We can't because the click share isn't working in this room.
Okay.
Oh, so
Yeah.
picture is how we get it.
The audio comes through.
Okay, so I will,
People know.
I'll sit over here like that so they can hear a little better.
That sounds great.
And then if there's ever an echo, I'll just mute my computer.
Here, I'll be in the middle. You bring it.
Perfect.
All right, okay.
Look how in the room and she knows more than us. So that's about. Look how your voices are silent.
Voices
are
This is just. I'm gonna be in like the middle of the room, that way you guys can hear better over here and you can kind of hear over here. Okay. Kind of get through it. Okay, so do you want me to sit closer to you? Is that what you need? So Jeremy, can you hear Aleya?
Go ahead and speak, Aleya.
Hey,
Yeah, I can hear you.
okay, perfect. All right, thank you so much.
Okay.
So we're gonna move faster than intended, so if I'm talking a little too fast, just let me know, because we obviously spent about 30 minutes on tech issues. Again, welcome to the 2022 State Index on Youth Homelessness. Both Jeremy and I are excited to share this work with you all. We are gonna share some key results and findings. We're definitely gonna share like some transformative action to walk away with from this presentation. And we hope that you all just walk away inspired to join us in the fight to end youth homelessness. Okay. So I first want to start this presentation by pointing out our why behind this work and this report specifically. I don't know if you have seen these numbers before, but obviously this is a huge issue right in our country. Unhoused youth face numerous legal and systemic barriers that complicate or prevent their access to critical supports and services like shelter, medical care, public benefits, and education. If we can ensure that services are safe for and affirming of the most impacted young people, we can be confident that they'll be safe and affirming for everyone. We believe that youth homelessness is a community issue, and real change can happen if we all come together and come together with a shared vision. So I'm going to briefly walk through the methodology of our report. I'm not sure if you have seen it before or not, but the index evaluates each state in the District of Columbia's investment towards preventing and ending youth homelessness. by reviewing certain metrics and benchmarks across laws and policies, systems, and environment. A high score on the index doesn't necessarily indicate that state government is effectively addressing these issues, and I really want to make sure that we understand that. Many states that earn high scores on the index face extraordinary challenges in addressing homelessness within their state lines for reasons not captured by the index, such as broader economic policies, community level approaches to homelessness, and housing supply issues. So we want to make sure that we're stating that the index measures a state structure to eliminate youth homelessness in general. We are not measuring whether or not a state is effectively implementing some laws and policies, or if they are reducing the number of youth experiencing homelessness, right? We also don't address or measure the pace of advocacy efforts over time. So some states may have performed low on our index, but that doesn't mean they're not using like Hercules efforts to address youth homelessness within their state. Nonetheless, we do think that the index is a useful starting place for young people, providers, advocates, and policymakers to ensure their state has the prerequisite policies, both in writing and in effect, that they'll need to redirect some of the most common pipelines to youth homelessness towards housing for all. So the metrics and benchmarks measured in the state index are indicative of a state's overall approach towards youth homelessness. We're trying to understand if states have created coordinated efforts to youth homelessness service. So we do stand behind all of the harm reduction metrics included in this report, such as calling out why key definitions need to be adopted, and they, along with other relevant laws and policies, need to be more inclusive, developmentally and culturally appropriate, and youth-centric in order to support and end youth homelessness for all who seek publicly funded services. We are also measuring whether a state is proactively working towards ending the criminalization of youth experiencing homelessness to prevent harmful criminal records that could impede future goals and housing stability. We're also looking at if states are reducing and eliminating barriers to food and financial supports that would enable youth experiencing homelessness the opportunity to grow and reach financial and housing stability. So these are some of our law and policy metrics that we look across all states. Go ahead. Again, just to reiterate, harm reduction makes the process easier for youth to navigate the system. So when it comes to systems and environments, we're tracking things like whether a state has a state entity such as an Office of Homeless Youth Services, a homeless youth state coordinator, or a commissioner on youth homelessness that focus solely on designing, implementing, and evaluating youth homelessness programs. Are there protections in place against discrimination for youth who are seeking services, such as implementing policies that ban controversial and ineffective services for LGBTQ youth, such as conversion therapy, and creating a statewide strategy to prevent and youth homelessness that is inclusive of LGBTQ youth, right? Increasing access and trust in these services for LGBTQ youth is critical to ending youth homelessness. So just briefly going over our grading system, right? So out of a possible 100 points, over half of the points are distributed across what we found as 13 key metrics. And then the remaining metrics grounded by law and policy, systems and environments were weighted equally. These metrics are researched first by a team of pro bono attorneys who score state statutes, regulations, and plans for relevant information. After this first round of research, initial findings are then sent out to key stakeholders who review and give feedback and corrections to our scoring. So that's a bit about our scoring system. I'm going to now pass it over to Jeremy to go over some results and findings from this year's state index.
Hello. Can you all still hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So these are the immediate results, the top line results of the state index this year. As you can see, 7 states received a passing score, 27 states received a low score, 17 states received a critically low score. I know we're a bit pressed for time, so I'll try and move through the slides a bit quicker. But the one thing I really wanted to note about this and the next slide, where we'll show you it in map form, and you're welcome to change the slide to the next slide, is that I think this information can make us feel a sense of despair, but I'm sort of channeling what Mark was telling us yesterday, right? Which is that like multiple realities can be true. And we can look at the results and say, things are really bad for youth who are experiencing homelessness, and also say, what that means is there is a ton of opportunity for youth, homeless youth advocates themselves, along with the advocates who work with them, to create the systems that we are looking to see across the country in all of these various jurisdictions. It's an opportunity, and it's not just something that is horrible and bad. I did want to note, so this is a year-by-year comparison between 2021 and 2022. 7 states earned passing grades in 2022 compared to 10 in 2021, and 34 scored higher than 50 points out of 100 compared to 30 in 2021. Some of these changes are due to substantive changes in the laws, policies, et cetera, and so forth that are occurring at the state levels. Some of this is due to improved research quality on the back end in creating the report, and that we've also been very excited about. So these are our top 5. Massachusetts, California, Washington State, the District of Columbia, and Maine coming in there tied for 4th. I want to reiterate what Aleya said, which is that the state index is not capturing the present tense quality or effectiveness of a state in addressing youth homelessness. What it's capturing are the structures that states have in place to provide resources to youth who are experiencing homelessness, and whether or not there are barriers in the way to providing those resources. And so California is sort of a perfect example of this. It's the #2 state in the index this year. Obviously, California has not magically gotten rid of youth homelessness just because it's earned lots of points on this state index, right? Homelessness in California and youth homelessness in California is a tremendous problem, as we've been hearing about all forum long. And similar for the bottom 5. So we have Arkansas and North Dakota coming in tied at 50. I should add, by the way, that in the index, we refer to Washington, D.C. as a state because it should be, even though it isn't yet. And so all of our metrics are done out of 51 air quote states. And then the other 3 rounding out our bottom 5 are South Carolina, Arizona, and South Dakota. And again, the same way that states having very strong scores does not mean that they are actually getting people housed on the ground. A low score on the index doesn't mean that the state is not putting forward very impressive efforts to address youth homelessness. So this is a breakdown of the scoring for all of the various states by our 3 buckets, right? We have laws and policies, we have systems, and we have environment. And I'll harken back to what I said looking at the map, which is that, as you can see here, so the majority of the state index falls under laws and policies, and no state in the country met a perfect score in that category. So immediately, it doesn't matter what state you're from, you have stuff you can go back and do in your jurisdiction, because there's already something that is missing in a particular jurisdiction or that is present in a particular jurisdiction that we are looking to change. In the systems bucket, only 1 state scored a perfect score. It's Washington State. And again, in the environment bucket, only 1 state met a perfect score, and that was California. As you can see as well, within the environment bucket of metrics, that's where we see a lot of states that are scoring very poorly, where a large majority of states have atrocious environments for youth who are homeless or experiencing homelessness, or at risk of experiencing homelessness. And so there is a ton of work to be done in those environment metric categories. And what are these metrics that we keep talking about? Here's 6 of them. We've cherry picked a few for you today. If we have enough time, I would love to maybe talk through all 6 of them. I don't know, Aleya and Katie, if you think I have time to do that.
I think you should.
Okay, perfect. So I'll run through these. We've color-coded them for your visual pleasure and convenience. The 4 orange ones here are part of our law and policy bucket, and the 2 green ones here are part of our systems bucket. So emancipation, 18 states, including DC, do not have a codified emancipation process. And what that means is that emancipation is extremely, extremely difficult for homeless youth to access. And it is basically impossible to access without skilled legal help. And codifying the emancipation, I should say all 6 of these that we have here are, to our view, easy lifts, right? So codifying the emancipation process is something that's an easy lift for you to get done during the next legislative session that makes a huge world of difference for youth who are trying to access emancipation so that they have access to the legal tools and the legal rights available to emancipated youth to be able to provide for themselves. Along those lines, consent to mental health care. There are still 9 states that do not allow youth to consent to mental health care, and there are 18 states that do not allow youth to consent to examination and treatment relating to a sexual assault. And I'll point out something that I think Katie noted as we were putting this together, which is that there are a number of components of healthcare where every jurisdiction in the country has enacted laws that enable youth to consent. I should flag, I'll back up half step. Consent to mental health care or examination and treatment relating to a sexual assault without parental consent. I wanted to add that gloss. I think it's missing from the text here. There are certain things like substance abuse treatment and STI testing where every jurisdiction in the country already allows this. And that's because of really effective but incremental pushes at a state-by-state in a state-by-state manner over decades that have secured those rights to consent to those components of healthcare across every jurisdiction. And so we think mental health care is the next one to go for, along with examination and treatment for sexual assault. Obviously, our long-term goal is for youth to have the ability to consent to all forms of healthcare without needing parental consent. So along similar lines, I'm going to skip and then jump back. The right to contract. A lot of states get credit for this one in the bottom left of the slide, where even when the only contracting rights that minors have are for life and health insurance. And so only 20 states specifically itemize and allow youth to contract for housing and shelter, and Nebraska is the only state in the country that does not allow any right to contract for minors. This one's also an easy lift, right?
There's a question.
Oh,
Can you
yes.
explain like what that means, like contract for like what? Elaborate on that, please.
Yes. So when we talk about the right to contract, what it means is the ability to sign a binding contract with someone else. So in this case, what we're talking about is typically leases. We're talking about a homeless youth's person, a homeless youth's ability to, if they have access to whether it's emergency funding from the state or, you know, insert XYZ revenue stream for a particular service, that even if we have a place for them to live, if they don't have a parent or guardian who can contract for them, they don't have the ability to sign that contract, which means they have no way to get housing, even though they might have the ability to pay for it. And so that's what we mean when we talk about the right to contract. It's the ability to actually engage in binding legal contracts with other parties.
Thank you.
Yeah. And so sort of everything I just said, right? This is something that's really core to ending youth homelessness. We want youth to be able to contract to their own housing. It's one of the best ways to get them out of shelters and off of street homelessness and into actual housing. I'll jump backwards to our final orange bullet point here, which is the definition of childhood. And this is something that Katie and I really wanted to throw in here, which is that, you know, I've been going through all these terrible things in the metrics. We want to celebrate something. All 50 states and DC established that the age of childhood in the context of youth homelessness encompasses people older than 18. That's amazing. Every single jurisdiction has that. That is fantastic because it means that we're recognizing that people who are between the ages of 18 and say 26 actually are still youth when we think about it, right? There isn't like a fairy godmother magic wand that bippity boppity boo turns people into adults with the resources that other adults have and the abilities that other adults have the day that they turn 18, right? And so that there is we want to see and are excited to see it getting created, a continuum of care that runs long past 18 for the full extent to which people need these resources.
Hey, Jeremy, we have one other question in the room.
Yes.
So is there some type of like, I guess like override that can happen in states like Maryland, when you have like the McKinney-Vento Act, where like it's illegal for a youth to be homeless. It's literally illegal. So in that case, in states like Maryland that have that law in place, that act in place, the youth still can't sign anything for themselves if they don't, you know what I'm saying? Like, or can that kind of like override the fact that they can't technically sign anything?
I would have to double check whether Maryland is one of the 20 states that allows youth to contract for housing and shelter. I don't know off the top of my head. I don't remember off the top of my head. My understanding of McKinney-Vento is that it does not override a provision like that in state law. And Katie might be able to correct me if I'm wrong. My understanding of McKinney-Vento is that it puts the protections in place regarding education so that schools are not allowed to effectively say, oh, you're a homeless youth, and because of your housing situation, with homeless defined very broadly, and say, you no longer live in this district, so we're going to kick you out of school.
Right.
I hope that answers that question. Katie, is there any more you would add to that answer?
Yeah, I think so. So Maryland is listed as having contract rights for youth, although we have to double check. It's the thing to see if it's just for that life and health insurance or if they expanded it beyond. Some of what the index is also meant to capture is maybe not as far as contracting, but also just consent. Like, can a youth even consent to staying at a youth shelter on their own accord? Some states do very specifically say, if a youth does not have a guardian or parent that can consent for them because they're leaving a home due to abuse or something else, the youth then is able to consent to their own shelter. That doesn't go as far necessarily as like actually contracting, because a contract then, you know, puts legal obligations on the youth as well, right? If they're signing a lease, then they are obligated for that rent. But that's like another tool that can happen to help youth as well. But we're happy to talk more about Maryland too. If we connect after the session, we can give you some Maryland specific data. Yeah.
Yeah, and you'll find a little bit more at the end. I talk about the report and the website, and that's when we give like examples of policy priorities state by state.
Okay.
Yeah.
And we have one, we have one other question over here.
Yeah, it may be a two-part question. So with the I guess my question would be, is there a correlation or other ways of the Youth Demonstration Act, like states that are participating, that incentivizes those rights, like correlation between the 20 states that do have those rights? And then my second kind of question would be, like, within the MOUs that like shelters and other ways within permanent supportive housing, are there ways that could be a route or that has been used, like the agencies that are getting MOUs that they have more?
Yeah, I'll jump in and just answer that quickly. So the second part, we're going to talk a little bit about it in the 201 session, just the issue of, you know, can agencies sort of have specific, you know, ways to allow youth to kind of access that shelter, even if a parent can't consent. Sometimes that is accessed through like the child welfare system, like you have to go through CPS or something to be able for that youth to access the shelter. There's problems with that, as we'll talk about in 201. As far as like the homeless demonstration project sites, youth homelessness demonstration project sites are concerned, that is something that, and we'll talk a little about this later, going forward, we would like to kind of connect some of these metrics to see like, okay, like let's see those youth homelessness demonstration program sites. Have they implemented all the things that we think they should that are in these metrics? And does that actually affect the numbers on youth homelessness? And some good news that the Youth Homelessness Demonstration Program, they're trying to make that a permanent federal funding stream right now. So we're actually been working with Senator Coon's office in Delaware to get that legislation out to be able to, you know, not have it just be like a demonstration project. Yeah, exactly, like a final final project, we'll say. And And then I think we had one other question.
So all states are required to have this index or not?
Okay, yeah.
No, I think that's part of the reason why we are trying to revamp the index is because we have all of this information, right? We're measuring different states across various metrics. But then I don't know that we have yet to get it in the right hands of folks who can actually like push forth legislation to make sure, right, that we're having codified state level efforts to address everything that we think we should to end youth homelessness. But you know, hopefully, even if we have time at the end of this session, we can all brainstorm on like how can we actually use the state index
Right.
and implement all the things that are within this.
Okay.
Anyone else?
Back to you, Jeremy.
Wonderful. Should I move on to the next slide, or should I finish off with tuition waivers and proof of residency?
Maybe just briefly.
Yeah. So tuition waivers, another metric we wanted to pull out and highlight, sort of similar to definition of childhood, where we wanted to highlight something, which is that all states provide at least $5,000 a year in education and training vouchers for our current and former foster youth, which is fantastic. What we want to see, right, our goal is that we want every state to provide full waivers for all foster and unhoused youth. That to us is the gold standard of what we are looking for. And so this is one of those things where we have our benchmark that we are looking for, and we also have a baseline that's been established that we're excited to celebrate. Proof of residency, only 26 states allow youth to access a state ID without parental consent. As you can imagine, if you think about all of the things you would need a state ID for, whether that is public benefits, health insurance, education, shelter and housing programs, et cetera, and so forth, a state ID is essential. And if a youth is fleeing home because of domestic abuse, if a youth does not have parents anymore, for all of the various reasons that youth don't have parents or guardians to consent for this, they have no way to get a state ID, which means that they have no legal identification to provide in the context of trying to access these programs. And this to us, again, is an easy lift. It's something that everyone could work on this upcoming year to get done. We also wanted to note, real quick on the back, yes. We also wanted to note that while it's not written here, something that we are paying attention to is access to changes in gender markers. I am very blessed that I have had the ability to alter my gender marker without needing to really do much of anything except submit the paperwork. My home state of New Jersey, the federal government for my birth certificate, the federal government for my passport, and Washington, D.C. for my driver's license, all three of those allow someone to change their gender marker effectively without any documentation from a medical provider, without having to provide a justification or reason of explaining their transness. And that is something we view as fundamental, right? Because I can tell you what, like I said, y'all are going to get a weepy version of me today. Not having the gender marker that is right for you, I've been trying to figure out how to explain this to people. It feels like you are at a masquerade ball in a mask that someone else put on you and you can't take it off. And finally getting to alter that gender marker is like getting to be in the outfit or clothes and mask that you want to be wearing, or not even a mask at all. And the affirmational value it has is really undeniable. I have been discussing this with Katie and Aleya. Our gold standard in the future, we think, is that we would like to simply see the elimination of gender markers on IDs. We don't think they're necessarily relevant. But in the meantime, we want to see the ability for youth, all youth, to update their gender marker without parental consent and to include non-binary gender markers like X or O in every jurisdiction. And so that is something we really wanted to highlight in the context of state IDs. And now, next slide. Thank you. So these were, these were just some other points we wanted to highlight. Again, only 7 out of 51 states, states earned a passing grade of 70 or higher. I really wanted to have an example of how this works on the ground, right? Of how our metrics connect to what's happening on the ground. Only 24 states allows homeless youth to use SNAP to buy hot restaurant or prepared meals. What does that have to do with anything, right? Well, if youth are living in a dorm because they're in school, or they're living on the street, or they are in congregate housing in shelters, they don't have access to a kitchen. So the value of being able to use SNAP to buy groceries is not necessarily particularly effective for that youth to be able to have meals. And so what we want to see is every jurisdiction allowing not just, obviously we want it to be not just homeless youth, but all people on SNAP, but we'll start with homeless youth to be able to buy hot restaurant or prepared meals using their using SNAP funds, because that's what actually allows homeless youth to have food that they can eat and not simply have access to a resource that they then can't spend in a way that provides them with the actual material benefit that we're trying to get them. Additionally, only 21 states have a full ban on conversion therapy for minors on the basis of sexual orientation, gender identity, or expression. This is something Aleya and I really wanted to make sure we highlighted for you all, especially with the wave of anti-LGBTQ bills that we have seen over the last year. Conversion therapy is a deeply, deeply fucked up practice. And I look forward to the day when it does not exist anywhere in any society ever. In the meantime, there are certain places where it is not possible. The 11th Circuit, which covers the states of Florida, Georgia, and Alabama, has actually bans on conversion therapy for minors on the grounds that it violates the free speech rights of the therapists, air quotes. And so this is going to be an uphill battle. I would hate to see that precedent get expanded. I'm not particularly optimistic given the current makeup of the federal judiciary. But this is something that we view as fundamental, because banning conversion therapy for minors is something that saves lives immediately. It is something that saves kids from one of the most traumatizing experiences that LGBTQ youth can get put through. And with that, we will move on to our recommendations and calls to action. I believe the first couple slides here are mine, and then I will be passing it back over to Aleya. I'm keeping an eye on time, so I'll move a little quickly through these. Key takeaways. I can sort of let you all read through these, right? Enacting comprehensive laws for identification, prevention, etc. Enacting laws that prevent unnecessary involvement with the criminal and juvenile legal systems. Removing barriers to emancipation, we talked about that already. Allowing partial and alternative school credit accrual, that to us is also a super, super easy lift. Ensuring that unhoused youth can access and consent to their own healthcare, we talked about that as well. What I really want you all to be able to take away from this is that we would love to see the work that gets done in the upcoming legislative sessions to be more than piecemeal, right? Instead of, here are the 2 to 5 metrics from the report that we want to get done. What if we had comprehensive legislation, right? What if we tried to pass legislation that covered a broad array of the issues that we are seeing in our particular jurisdiction? And so that is, I mean, to me, above even the individual takeaways we have listed here, that's the biggest takeaway, is we want to see a structural overhaul of what's going on within the laws and policies of various jurisdictions. Next slide. These are our 3 big takeaways from the systems and environment. Creating and funding a state entity that focuses solely on designing, implementing, and evaluating youth homelessness programs, and then maintaining a self-governing youth action council to inform youth homelessness policy within the state, and strengthening and enforcing protections against discrimination for youth who are seeking services, particularly LGBTQ youth. Again, I think what you can see here is a goal for something that is more systemic, and for enacting genuine and meaningful space for the people who are actually going through this, for homeless youth, to have a say in what is happening to them. Because far too often, I say far too often, that's like very like, again, white person in a button-down shirt at a conference language. The constant struggle that we are engaging with right, is us speaking over the voices of the people who are actually going through this. And the opportunity to have self-governing youth action councils means that we are putting the people who should be leading, or not even leading, because that's too much obligation on them, who should have the say, right? Representative Ayanna Presley says the people with the pain should be the ones closest to the power. And that's what we're looking for. That the power is placed in the hands of homeless youth and the obligations are placed in the hands of those people who are providing them with the services that they need to thrive. And with that, I will turn it over to Aleya. Thank you all. Oh, I have one more slide. Oh, no, wait. Is this yours, Aleya?
Yeah.
I apologize. I will pass the mic back over to Aleya.
Okay, great. We're getting ready to wrap up and hopefully leave a little bit of time for questions. But I wanted to discuss with you all our top 4 priorities that we encourage advocates to champion in their communities. The first, which we've mentioned before, we want to codify state-level coordination of services for unhoused youth, which can provide critical infrastructure and funding to programs dedicated to ending youth homelessness. The second, we want each state to implement policies that reduce unhoused youth interactions with juvenile and criminal legal system, such as repealing or removing curfew laws and decriminalizing truancy and running away. It's a really big one for us. Our third priority is to support young people's dreams. We want each state to achieve true access to higher education for unhoused youth. And lastly, which is a relatively new one that we all really care about, we've mentioned throughout this, is we want states to improve enforcement of federal non-discrimination policies for unhoused LGBTQ youth to ensure they receive culturally competent services free of harassment and abuse. These are just a few of the many issue areas that we're leveraging from the state index. And as you all get a chance to actually look at the report and view what's happening in your state, we hope that you all hold those in power accountable to ensuring that we're creating the right practices and systems to address what's going on. And lastly, it's really important for us, and I'll say especially on behalf of True Colors United, that the state index does more work on addressing how anti-LGBTQ policies interact with youth homelessness, right? And we definitely wanted to spend time addressing the cruel and inhumane laws that were introduced this year, right, and before as well, and how this leaves LGBTQ youth more vulnerable to homelessness, right? So some examples that I wanted to point out here was there have been bills passed that mandate school employees to out trans children and youth to their parents, which is extremely harmful. Gender-affirming healthcare has been banned, such as puberty blockers, or even removing trans children and youth from loving and supportive homes by redefining best practices in gender-affirming healthcare. These policies are inhumane. There have been a bunch of don't say gay bills passed in the classroom where you cannot even teach young people about the history of, you know, being a part of the community. And as someone who is queer, I just think about what it means to have, you know, my history erased, right? Like, as a Black woman, it's already, I would say, hard enough to learn about, you know, my history, but then you add on being queer and how for some young people who are queer, they cannot even learn about themselves, about leaders in the community. And this is incredibly harmful, right? So we see these policies as inhumane. They violate the basic human rights of self-expression and self-determination that all people share. And trans youth in particular are disproportionately represented among young people experiencing homelessness. And any policy which places them in increasingly hostile social or family environments increases the risk of housing insecurity. Mark, the keynote speaker, made a point yesterday that I found really relevant as they were talking about, like, we all live in our own stories, and we're lucky enough if our community affirms that story. I think of the countless LGBTQ young folks who are not affirmed in their story. And how harmful that is, right? I know for me, having a community that by my side that affirms me and supports me when society tells me different means, you know, the world to me. Affirming our dignity and safety go hand in hand, and in order to effectively address youth homelessness, stand behind harm reduction metrics. We must also be willing to call out and stand against incredibly harmful and discriminatory political rhetoric towards LGBTQ communities. So we just launched, before we started, our report. It's on our website, youthstateindex.com. On the website, you will find the actual report, which, as we've stated before, it just breaks down how each state is doing across all metrics, right? So we have some graphics on there, but we also wanted to include an opportunity to highlight some recommendations, right? So we go through and we read everything that has happened last year and this year, and we say this is what this state is doing really great at, but here's room for improvement. Every single state has room for improvement, regardless if they're the top scoring state or not, as we talked about before. And as you'll see on the website, we also, give folks an opportunity to see, in comparison to last year, how is our state doing? What percentage of metrics were met, and what can we continue to doing to join the efforts to end youth homelessness. And then we'll open up. We have about 10, 15 minutes for questions. And just conversation and talking about, other things that we may have missed and how we can, we're really curious to know how we can move this state index forward in different states. So.
I think we'd also be interested to hear if folks are involved with state level advocacy efforts and what y'all are thinking about, the coalitions you're involved with are thinking about this year.
So I work for the Rhode Island Coalition to End Homelessness, and Rhode Island was, for the first year, last year, was the first time we were ever awarded for the Youth Homelessness Demonstration Program. So my organization is currently the YHDP lead, thankfully. So we just incorporated youth work about 1.5 years ago to our organization, and then we were blessed to receive the funding. So we had submitted the CCP, which is the hub of the work that needs to be done. And we're working really hard with the partners and our YHCP grantees. So we feel that the work is moving and coming along, and we're making strides right now. So it's a big accomplishment for our organization to be where they are with, ending youth homelessness in Rhode Island. So. Mm-hmm.
Is that sort of the first dedicated federal funding stream that Rhode Island has had for youth homelessness? Right, because we had applied 3 years previously and we've never gotten it. So this year we finally got it, and it was such a blessing for our state. So.
And I think we would love to connect after as well, just to learn more about what's going on in Rhode Island. Because I know one of the speakers mentioned yesterday, I think we're all trying different things, and it would be great for everyone to be unified in efforts. It just makes sense if it's working here, and it can work, so yeah.
Yeah, right now we're in the process of, so my organization, we are the head for the HMIS system in Rhode Island, and our coordinated entry system, which is the prioritization system for homeless clients to basically be prioritized, which kind of sucks because everyone should be prioritized for housing, but it doesn't work that way. So right now we're in the process of working to revamp the CES system to be more youth friendly, because that was one of the biggest barriers, is that our youth were not able to access. There's maybe 1 or 2 shelters in Rhode Island for youth. So now we're working closely with the system to combine the two and make it more youth friendly and more youth appropriate, because we haven't had that prior to having YHTP funding.
And something else that Katie and I were briefly talking about yesterday is it's the data for youth homelessness. It's not accurate, right? We're not, and we had this conversation at the table yesterday, right? We're just not counting, couch surfing in this work. So there's a lot of work to be done for youth homelessness, and we really want to uplift this narrative and make sure that folks are prioritizing youth homelessness just as much as the broad work that's happening.
What other states are represented here? I know we have Maryland, I think, and then
New York.
Rhode Island.
Is that not in New York?
No. You're one of those. Rhode Island. We're the smallest. We're the smallest state.
It's not as well, it's now a state. Not yet.
No.
Okay. So none of us know our states.
I was on the Houston COC for 2 years, and we got the Youth Demonstration Act, so really proactive with youth. One of my goals was we already used the alternative to the VSPADAT, so the prioritization in, as far as just, failure to count ACE scores for people of color. And so with our youth, I guess my question for you all would be, with the tuition component, I think about AmeriCorps and some of these other opportunities, for youth in those systems. Don't answer that right now. Just unfortunately, a degree doesn't mean the same thing when you talk about LGBT youth of color with disabilities. And so I think both capturing that and with advocacy for that tuition is finding ways where once you go through all of these obstacles and steps for it to mean, the same thing for other youth. So that would be, I guess, just one of the additions to prioritization, making tuition mean something for youth of color, disabilities, and LGBT, that intersection.
I've heard that Houston is making strides on homelessness numbers.
Yeah. ICH came out when I was still on the way home, and so youth they've been really intentional about youth voice and youth being not just at the table but actually leading.
It's great. Yeah, that's meaningful work. I don't want to put you on the spot, Josh, but can you tell me a little bit about, it's like the Way Home America thinking of anything for 2023?
Yeah, we're thinking of a lot of things. So to your earlier point about what's next for YHDP with Senator Coons, we are on a small team to dig into that legislation. By happenstance, in my marathon of networking last night, actually made contact with a legislative aide for someone who is on HUD Appropriations Committee. So
Yay.
Networking marathon worked out last night. But that's one thing here in the lame duck session. Actually, the Senator Coons YHDP bill will be introduced at the beginning of next congressional session. So we're just trying to get the language. It's a little more reformative in nature than we would like it to be. We want it more transformative. So we're just gonna throw everything, including the kitchen sink, at him in his office and see what sticks. But to make YHDP funds an ongoing and continuous process, and really in that what's next. There's two other bills going on right now. Senator Leahy's office has one around Runaway Homeless Youth Protection Act, and Senator Murray also has a bill, and all of the bills are like screaming in my head and I'm getting them all confused. But being the lame duck session, neither will probably get through the process. So for Way Home America, starting not next week, but the week after, we will start rolling out our policy priorities for 2023. We've got 3 policy recommendations and 3 policy stances, political stances. So we will release a stance and a recommendation each week in between this holiday and the next one in December, and hit the ground running. So more to come on that, but the first one that we'll release is around asking for a low or no barrier cash transfer program at least $1,000 a month for at least a year, scalable based off of cost of living. So that one will come out. We in our first political stance that we'll release also is asking for reparations for Black and Indigenous communities in land and home ownership. So just a little preview of what's coming for us.
Thanks for the preview.
You're
That's what I was
welcome.
hoping for.
There's more beyond that, but
little
that's where
inside.
that's all my head can wrap around right now. So I'll remember.
That's awesome. I'm excited. Yeah, and that's we'll talk about it a little bit in the 201 session, but just sort of some of the like we're definitely going to be revamping how so the index is moving from like a yearly release to more of a live updated thing, so we could just track it, you know, if any of these metrics get updated. But then what that will also give us the opportunity to do is like, what else can we add to track? And I think some of these transformational programs, like actual, trash transfers, guaranteed income for youth, there are states and jurisdictions that are trying that, and we want to track it and give credit where credit is due for those kind of programs. So I'm really looking forward to that. Yeah.
Yeah, Point Source Youth is doing a lot of great work in that space.
Yeah.
We'll probably lift up more of their priorities around that as well, and not really reinvent the wheel, but being one of our partners. So.
Great. Just thinking of one other thing to mention. Oh yeah, we were talking about like youth homelessness numbers, something we're always struggling with trying to get like accurate data. Chapin Hall at is it University of Chicago?
Yeah.
It's so weird because it's like it's such a traditionally conservative institution that I'm like, is that good work really coming out of University of Chicago?
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, Chapin Hall, they do have a lot of resources on their website, including a link to sort of their like method of figuring out how many homeless youth are in each state. So that I found to be slightly more accurate numbers. We also look at, for youth, I think under 18, like McKinneyVento numbers, because that's a much broader definition of homelessness than like HUD allows. But of course, that's only tracking, youth under 18.
Yeah, Chapin Hall's also, all I know that I can share is they're looking at an analysis of YHDP funded communities over the last few years, and putting together an analysis and recommendations in the broader YHDP What's Next with Senator Coons' office. So that's coming. I don't know what that looks like. I don't know any more than that, but I know that's something Chapin Hall's looking at.
That's awesome.
Right.
Yeah. Great.
Any other questions?
I was gonna say, make sure you guys can keep in touch. And I know, I guess we don't have it on here, but I'm sure we can definitely share email addresses. So when we send out, like when these materials all go out, like after the conference, we'll make sure that, we got contact info for everybody.